For 15 years, a man named Samuel Pruett drove Elvis Presley wherever he needed to go. He drove him to recording studios at 2 in the morning. He drove him to airports in cities he had never been to before. He drove him to his mother's grave at Forest Hill Cemetery and waited at the gate while Elvis walked to the headstone alone and spoke to her in the quiet way he always did. Samuel Pruett did not give interviews. He did not write a book. He did not speak at tribute events. He did not participate in the documentary projects that multiplied in the years after Elvis's death. He drove a car for a living. He drove it with the same quiet professionalism he brought to everything. And when Elvis died in August 1977, Samuel Pruett retired from driving. He was 51 years old. He moved to a small house in Germantown, Tennessee. He lived there quietly until his death in 1998. When his daughter sorted through his belongings afterward, she found 2 things in his bedside drawer: a rosary and a photograph. The photograph had no writing on the back, no date, no inscription, no explanation. It showed 2 men. One of them was Elvis. The other was Samuel. They were sitting at a kitchen table. They were not performing for a camera. They were just sitting, 2 men at a table, with the ease and the silence of people who have spent enough time together that they no longer need to fill the space between them with words. Samuel's daughter had never seen the photograph before. She had known that her father had worked for Elvis. She had known he had driven him for 15 years. She had known this the way you know facts about a parent's professional life, abstractly, without the details. But she had never seen this ease, this specific quality of 2 people who are comfortable together in a way that cannot be manufactured. She asked her mother about it. Her mother said, "Ask your uncle." Her uncle had worked at Graceland for several years in the early 1970s. He was 82 years old and living in a retirement community in Memphis. He received his niece at a small table in the common room. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he told her what he knew. Samuel Pruett had come to work for Elvis in 1962. He had been recommended by a former employee who was leaving to take work in Nashville. He was 36 years old. He had been driving professionally for 8 years. Private clients, mostly. The kind of work that required discretion and reliability and the specific skill of making a wealthy person feel safe. The first thing Samuel's uncle noted about the relationship was that it was different from the beginning. Elvis had drivers before Samuel. He had gone through several. Not because he was difficult. Everyone who worked at Graceland was clear about this. But because the work required someone who understood something specific about what the job actually was. It was not just driving. It was proximity. It was being in a small, enclosed space with someone for hours at a time, multiple times a week, and knowing what that proximity required. Samuel understood. He drove. He did not speak unless spoken to. He did not ask questions. He did not treat silences as problems to be solved. He simply drove. And because he did not fill the silences, Elvis began to fill them. Not immediately, not in the first months, but gradually, in the way that trust accumulates between people who spend a lot of time in each other's presence. Trust built not from conversation, but from the consistent, reliable fact of someone being there and not requiring anything. Samuel's uncle described what he had observed over the years. Elvis talked to Samuel, really talked. Not the managed, careful talk that Elvis did in interviews or in the presence of people who wanted something from him. The other kind. The kind that happens in cars at 3 in the morning on the way home from somewhere. He talked about his mother, about what it was like to be in the army and know she was anxious, about the specific guilt of the son who is too far away, about Graceland, why he had bought it, what it meant, what it felt like to walk through it after she was gone. He talked about music, not the music he was making for his label, the songs selected by his manager and his producers and the commercial logic of a career in maintenance, the music he heard in his head, the things he wanted to do that he hadn't done, the gap between what he was capable of and what he was being given permission to attempt. He talked about God, about what he believed and what he couldn't make himself believe no matter how hard he tried, about the gospel tradition that had formed him and that he could never entirely leave behind, about the specific comfort and the specific terror of faith. Samuel listened. He drove. He offered occasionally a word or two, not advice, acknowledgement. The specific acknowledgement of someone who has heard what you said and is letting you know that it was heard. Elvis trusted him completely. Not with things, not with information, with himself. The photograph, the one found in the bedside drawer, was taken by a Graceland staff member in the kitchen of the main house sometime in the early 1970s. It was taken without announcement. The staff member had a camera for personal use and had captured the image on instinct. She had printed a copy and given it to Samuel. She had given another to Elvis. The kitchen, a table, 2 men. Elvis in a plain dark shirt, Samuel in his working clothes. Both of them looking at something off to the side. Neither of them performing anything. Just 2 people at a table, in the specific ease of people who have nothing to prove to each other. Samuel's uncle said that after Elvis died, Samuel did not go to the funeral. He was not asked. He was not part of the official circle. He was a driver. He went to Forest Hill Cemetery on the morning of the funeral and stood outside the gates for an hour. Then he went home. Then he retired. He never drove professionally again. His daughter kept the photograph. She had it framed. She hung it in her living room. She was asked once, in an interview that she gave to a Memphis oral history project in the 2010s, what she thought the photograph showed. She thought about it for a long time. "It shows," she said, "what Elvis was like when he wasn't Elvis." She paused. And my father was one of the few people who ever got to see that. Samuel Pruett drove Elvis Presley for 15 years. He drove him to the places where his music was made and to the graves of the people he had lost. He drove him through the long nights when the silence in the car was not empty, but full of the things Elvis needed to say to someone who did not need him to be the king, who just needed him to be in the car, going somewhere, the same as always. The photograph sat in a bedside drawer for 20 years. In a small house in Germantown, Tennessee, 2 men at a kitchen table, looking at something off to the side. Nothing to prove. Nowhere to be. Just 2 people who knew each other. That was everything. And it was enough.